It's usually somewhere after the rough animation phase when I realize that I need to start drawing the viewer's eye towards specific areas of the scene and create a sense of visual hierarchy. In order to do that, a lot of times I'll turn to effects, and sometimes I'll even add extra graphic elements into the scene like shapes. Now, before we start doing that in this project, I want you to notice that there are a number of panels that are open that don't necessarily need to be there. This is quite common when you're working and building different elements, so there are a couple quick things you can do to reset the interface before you get started. Let's go up to the upper right corner, and under the Workspace pull-down, let's click on Standard and choose Reset Standard. Yes, we want to reset it to its original layout, and this looks significantly better, but I'm noticing that I'm still cutting off parts of my composition. So if you just click once in your composition panel to make sure that it's active with this orange-yellow line around the outside, you can press Shift and the question mark key or the / key. When you press those two keys, you'll automatically resize that image to fit in the window. Now, if I go ahead and click and drag to change the size of my timeline, notice it's going to go ahead and scale up or down accordingly. Now, another little tip when you're working. If you're at 50% magnification, you probably want to look over here at your resolution pull down. Let's click on this one because it's set to full. I want to set mine to auto. What auto does is it helps After Effects optimize the viewing of the specific composition. So for example, if I'm at 50% magnification, it really only needs to render half the pixels. So it goes ahead and cuts down the resolution to half. So now, since I set it to auto, if I change my resolution, this will change accordingly. And that helps speed things up. But I know we haven't added effects or text yet. So let's see why we want to add effects or text, and then we'll get started. So if you go down to the timeline, click on the current time indicator and scrub through the animation. At around 5 seconds, I can see that I have this kind of cool graphic look that's built through the scene. But now when we move down to our little end here, we have training that's popped up, and day one that's sort of off to the side, and then our sort of bug logo in the corner. Well, I want these words to pop off the background a little bit more clearly because I have all of this visual noise that's created from all these different bleachers. So we'll start by actually blurring the background a little bit, and then we'll see what we can do to add some shapes and adjust some transparency so we can lead people around the scene visually. So let's move our current time indicator to around frame 812. Now make sure you have layer 12 selected, the stair rundown layer. If you're wondering why it's numbered layer 12, it's because we have a bunch of layers hidden using the Shy key. All right, so with 12 selected, let's go up under the Effect pull down. In the effects controls, the last filter that you ever applied will automatically be loaded up here, so you could quickly use the key command to get it back. Effects are all grouped into different groups based on what you're trying to do. So if I were trying to stylize this, I had a bunch of stylized options like glow or posterize, but I want to add a blur, so I'm going to go to the blur section, and sure enough, I'll add fast blur. I like fast blur because it renders relatively quickly and it still gives a decent blur. Now let's increase the amount of blur. I like to click and drag on parameters so I can see a preview of what's happening as I'm making the adjustment. So I still want to see our runner running down the steps, but he doesn't need to be quite as sharp. So let's set the blurriness to around 12. You might notice here on the left side of my effect control next to the word blurriness and blur dimensions, I can add keyframes. So let's go ahead and do that. When we add the keyframe, it's automatically going to be added to frame 812 because that's where my current time indicator is. Now, I don't want this layer to start this blurry. I want to see the layer clearly and then have it blur in. So if we scrub through our animation, you can see I'm going from this blue into this open scene. So right here at the transition at 8 seconds is where I want the blur to start. Now I know these layers begin at 8 seconds, so I'm going to go ahead and click on layer 3, the training layer, and I'll press I on my keyboard to make sure that I'm at the end point of that layer. Now let's reselect our stair rundown layer, and we can change our blurriness parameter from 12 to 0. Now we've actually added 2 keyframes. If you want to see those keyframes, press the U key or the Uber key on your keyboard to show any animated properties for that layer. Now, if we scrub through the animation again, you can see, okay, the colors fade, and then we got our blur, and our text comes in. Training is the most dominant thing. Day one is kind of secondary, and then this bug logo is way too bright for my personal taste. So let's go ahead and scrub to the colorful area here, and adjust the brightness of our H+ logo. So I'm going to click right on that logo in the comp panel, and notice I'm having a hard time selecting that layer. So if we go to the timeline panel and click on layer 2, now it's selected. I want you to press T to open up its opacity, and then we can just click and drag to adjust its opacity down a little bit. Let's bring it down actually quite a bit to like 35%. Now as we scrub through, you can see I still have that logo in the corner, but it's not nearly as distracting. Now to add a little bit more attention behind the word training, I'm going to add a shape layer to that word. So to do that, we want to make sure that we don't have any layers selected in our timeline, and we currently don't. So now we can go up and click on a shape. Mine's already set to the ellipse tool. Yours may look like this with the rectangle tool. You can also press Q on your keyboard, and each time you press Q, it'll cycle through the different shapes. Now to add the shape, all we have to do is just click and drag. So as I'm dragging, I'm determining the size of the shape. I want it to fill right over top of that training word. Now, since I can't see what's going on, I'm just going to go ahead and let go with my mouse. The color of my shape is this color because of the fill setting up here at the top. The last time I created any graphic element in After Effects, it was that color. Yours may be white or another color. So if you want to change the color, just click on the color square and choose a different color. Now, I am going to go ahead and choose that kind of dark blue color here, and I'll click OK. Now, so I can see the text on top of the shape, let's move it in the layer hierarchy. So click on layer 1 and move it down below layer 2. So now when we let go, we have our text layer and our shape layer. But you notice, well, day 1 is not our text layer. Our text layer is all the way down here for training. So let's go ahead and bring that up in the hierarchy. I'm going to click on layer 4 and drag it up above layer 2. Now I can see that word, but I'm noticing I'm missing my plus symbol. So if we scroll down, there's layer 5. I can bring that up as well. Okay, now we have the word training over top of our shapes. I'm having a hard time seeing what's going on, so I'm going to press Shift-Command-H to hide any handles of any layers that we currently have selected. Now we can select layer 4 and adjust its opacity down because I find it's a little flat in its appearance. So with layer 4 selected, you guessed it, press T to open the opacity, and let's bring the opacity down a little bit. Let's bring it down to around 35%. Now I want this to fade in with the word itself. So if we select the word training and press the U key, we can open its keyframes. Now to quickly navigate in the timeline, I'm going to press J to move back to the previous keyframe, and then I'll set a keyframe for the opacity of our shape layer. Now I can press J one more time to move to the previous keyframe, and I'll set the opacity to 0. You can quickly navigate between keyframes using J and K. J moves you earlier in your timeline, so an earlier point in time, and then K moves you later in your timeline or downstream from where you are. So we're almost finished. Now all we need to do is preview our animation. A lot of times I like to go ahead and just scrub with my current time indicator. That way I get a good general idea as to what's going on. Now as I'm looking at this, the fact that day 1 is way over here on the side is bothering me. So I'm going to grab my selection tool and just click right on day 1 and start to move it. Now notice I'm not seeing any of those handles. Remember, when you use Shift-Command-H to hide handles, you want to generally press Shift-Command-H so you can see them again and continue working. When you think about shape layers or effects, they work very much like any other layer inside of After Effects. You just need to be very aware of what layer is selected before you add them into the scene. Or once you add them into the scene, you need to really think about why you're adding it into the scene, and is it actually solving a problem or creating another one.